There's a town in California that got so tired of tourists, the residents started ripping the highway signs down. The state kept replacing them. The residents kept tearing them down. This went on for years. Eventually, the state of California, the fifth largest economy on the planet, just gave up. The signs are gone. The town doesn't appear on most road maps, and the residents are thrilled about it. That's not even the wildest entry on today's list. We're counting down the 12 most hated towns on the California coast, and every single one of them proves that a gorgeous ocean view can hide some seriously dark secrets. One town fined homeowners $5 million in a single day for blocking public beaches. Another is so expensive that earning $100,000 a year officially qualifies you as low income. A seaside suburb markets itself as Surf City while white nationalist groups march down Main Street. And in one quiet farming community, a mass shooting exposed workers living in metal sheds with no insulation, earning $9 an hour, surrounded by homes worth nearly $2 million each. If this is your kind of content, and clearly it is because you're still here, hit subscribe. We do this every single week. Let's get into it. Number 12. Solvang. If you've ever been driving up the coast through Santa Barbara County and suddenly felt like you got teleported to a Hans Christian Andersen theme park, congratulations. You've stumbled into Solvang. The town was actually founded back in 1911 by a group of Danish immigrants who wanted to build a community that reminded them of the old country. And for a while, it probably did. Then the tourism board got involved, and everything went sideways. Today, Solvang draws over 1 million visitors a year to its windmills, half-timbered storefronts, and seemingly endless gift shops selling Viking helmets, wooden clogs, and butter cookies. Walk down Copenhagen Drive and you'll find Danish flags, thatched roof bakeries, and a replica of the Little Mermaid statue. It looks charming. It is charming. But there's a fakeness to it that visitors pick up on fast. Travel reviewers have been blunt. One visitor described Solvang as completely fake, calling it a Disneyland-style tourist trap where almost nothing is authentic. Another pointed out that the majority of the so-called Danish merchandise has never been within 1,000 miles of Copenhagen. It's mass-produced souvenirs with Scandinavian branding, sold to tourists who drove 90 minutes from LA for something they could have ordered on Amazon. The Eibleskiver is delicious, though. The Danish bakeries are legitimate, but the median home in Solvang runs about $1.4 million, which is a lot of money to pay for the privilege of living inside what amounts to a permanent Renaissance fair with better pastries. The real kicker is the housing market. Solvang has about 5,000 residents, many of whom commute to Santa Barbara or work in the wine industry. The town's economy runs almost entirely on tourist dollars, and when those tourists go home in the evening, the windmill-lined streets empty out fast. One resident described it as living on a movie set that only comes alive between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. After that, it's just you, the fake windmills, and the lingering smell of butter cookies. Solvang isn't dangerous. It's not dark. It's just deeply, profoundly performative. And that earns it a spot at the bottom of this list. Number 11. Carmel-by-the-Sea. Carmel is the kind of town that looks like it was designed by someone who watched a Hallmark movie and said, "Yes, but make it more expensive and significantly more controlling." In Carmel-by-the-Sea, it is genuinely illegal to wear high heels taller than 2 inches without first obtaining a permit from City Hall. You walk in, you ask for a heel permit, and they give you one for free. That is a real law. It's been on the books since 1963. The official reasoning is liability from tree roots that buckle the sidewalks, which is a very polite way of saying, we'd rather legislate your footwear than fix our infrastructure. Until Clint Eastwood got elected mayor in 1986, it was also illegal to eat ice cream on the sidewalk downtown. The city council's concern was sticky sidewalks. Eastwood literally ran for mayor on a platform of legalizing ice cream, and he won. That happened in a real American town, with real votes. There are no street addresses in Carmel, not just no street, numbers on the houses. The houses do not have numbered addresses at all. People describe where they live by landmarks and intersections. There are no chain restaurants, no neon signs, no home mail delivery. You want your mail, you drive to the post office like it's 1910 and you're picking up a telegram. The population has been shrinking, dropping from around 3,700 in 2010 to about $3,200 today. The median home costs $2.28 million. You're paying over $2 million for a cottage that doesn't have a street number, in a town that polices your footwear and took decades to decide that sidewalk ice cream was morally acceptable. Carmel is genuinely beautiful. The cypress trees along 17 Mile Drive are stunning. The Monterey coastline is world-class, but the town itself is run like a fairy tale dictatorship with a strict dress code and a deep distrust of fun. Number 10. Laguna Beach. From the sandstone bluffs above the Pacific Coast Highway, Laguna Beach looks like a painting. Crystal blue water smashing against jagged coves, expensive homes terraced up the hillside, tide pools full of sea anemones and starfish. It's one of the most photographed stretches of coastline in all of Southern California, and for good reason. It's also a town in the middle of what the local newspaper described as a summer of discontent. Every summer, Laguna Beach gets flooded. Traffic backs up for miles along the PCH. Parking is functionally non-existent, and the trash situation has reached a point where beach cleanup volunteers started cataloging their most absurd finds, which included fast food containers, abandoned coolers, and items that have no business being on a family beach. Town council meetings have turned into public therapy sessions. Residents line up to vent about noise at 2 a.m., about strangers parking in their driveways, about the general sense that Laguna Beach is being loved to death by people who treat it like a disposable playground. One longtime local described the summer season as feeling like the town gets invaded and then left to clean up the mess. The median home value sits around $2.95 million. So the deal you're getting is this: nearly $3 million for an oceanfront community where you cannot drive anywhere for 3 months of the year, where strangers park on your lawn, and where every council meeting sounds like a group therapy session about boundary violations. The frustration has gotten bad enough that some residents have started pushing for permit-only parking zones on residential streets near the beach, effectively walling off public coastline from anyone who doesn't already live there. Others have floated the idea of limiting beach access during peak summer months, which is both legally questionable and politically radioactive in a state where beach access is considered almost sacred. The message from Laguna Beach homeowners is clear. We love the ocean, we love the views. We just wish everyone else would stop showing up to enjoy them. This next town takes the tourist conflict to another level entirely because it involves your nose. Number 9. La Jolla. La Jolla sits at the northern edge of San Diego and is, by most traditional measures, one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in the country. TripAdvisor voters named La Jolla Cove the best beach in America. Over 2.3 million people visited in 2024 alone. The sandstone cliffs are dramatic. The sunsets look AI-generated. The median home price is about $3.9 million, and the whole place smells like a zoo that hasn't been cleaned in a decade. La Jolla Cove is home to a thriving colony of sea lions and seabirds, and their accumulated waste has been baking into the rocks for years. Locals have given the phenomenon a name. They call it cove stench. It is exactly what it sounds like. Thick, biological, impossible to ignore, especially when the wind shifts toward the restaurants perched above the cliffs. Multiple businesses near the cove, including some of San Diego's most well-known restaurants, actually sued the city over the smell. They called it a public health hazard. Tourist reviews regularly mention the odor hitting them mid-meal, which is not exactly the Yelp review you want when you're charging $40 for sea bass, and the animal situation got darker. The city permanently closed Point La Jolla in 2023 to protect the sea lions from tourist harassment. People were getting so close for selfies that mothers were abandoning their pups. By summer 2026, roughly half of the sea lion pups at the open section of the cove had died, compared to about 10% in the area that was closed off to humans. The evidence was pretty clear. The tourism was killing the wildlife. La Jolla is a place where the thing everyone comes to see, the sea lions and the natural beauty, is being destroyed by the act of seeing it. That's a contradiction you can actually smell. Number 8. Bolinas. This is the town from the opening of this video. And honestly, it deserves a longer look because the story is wild. Bolinas sits on the Marin County coast about an hour north of San Francisco, tucked behind a lagoon on a stretch of coastline that looks like it belongs in northern Scotland. The population is about 1,200. There's no fast food. There's no traffic. There are no public dumpsters. And for the last 50-plus years, the residents have been engaged in the longest and most passive-aggressive anti-tourism campaign in American history. It started in the late 1960s when residents began tearing down the highway signs that directed travelers off Route 1 toward Bolinas. Caltrans, the state transportation agency, dutifully replaced them. Residents tore them down again. This cycle repeated for years, maybe decades, until the state of California apparently decided it had better things to do and stopped replacing the signs altogether. One longtime resident joked that they've moved past keeping people from coming in. Now they remove signs so visitors can't even find their way out, trapping them in what they called the vortex that is Bolinas, never to be seen again. A museum staffer in town confirmed that the whole tradition started as pure protectionism. The residents didn't want outsiders finding them, and it worked. Bolinas barely shows up on GPS. If you drive through Marin County without knowing exactly where to turn, you'll miss it completely, which is exactly the point. If you're thinking about visiting Bolinas, just know that the town does not want you there. They've spent over half a century making that clear, and they have no plans to stop. Visitors who do find it report an eerie quiet, no cell service in some spots, and locals who give you the kind of look that says, "How did you get in here?" without saying a word. One travel writer described pulling into town and feeling like the entire population was silently willing them to turn around. And yet, despite all of this, Bolinas has a thriving local art scene, a community radio station, and a tight-knit culture that residents genuinely love. The irony is that Bolinas probably would be a great place to visit. The town just doesn't want you to know that. Number 7. Malibu. Malibu is one of the most famous stretches of coast on the planet. 21 miles of beaches, celebrity estates stacked along the cliffs, the Pacific Coast Highway winding past surf breaks and seafood shacks. The average home value is about $3.3 million, and some oceanfront compounds sell for $40 or $50 million. The problem is that a significant chunk of Malibu homeowners seem to believe they own the Pacific Ocean. California passed a law in 1976 guaranteeing public access to every beach in the state. Every inch of sand below the high tide line belongs to the public. That's the law. In practice, Malibu homeowners have spent nearly 50 years trying to reverse engineer that law into irrelevance. They've planted fake no trespassing signs near public access paths. They've hired private security guards, and in some cases, actual bodyguards, to physically intimidate beachgoers who attempt to reach the sand. Near Lechuza Beach, the city was accused of quietly removing public access signs so people wouldn't even know the beach was there. On a single day in December 2016, the California Coastal Commission dropped $5.1 million in fines against Malibu homeowners who were blocking access. One property owner got hit with a $4.185 million penalty alone. A commissioner on the panel said the fines reflected an attitude they see regularly in Malibu: the idea that the shoreline is their private backyard and everyone else needs to stay off. And it kept going. In 2025, a lawsuit accused Mark Atanasio, the billionaire owner of the Milwaukee Brewers baseball team, of using excavators to dredge public sand from Broad Beach and move it onto his own property. The lawsuit described it as a private property owner treating a public beach as their own personal sandbox and the disturbing conversion of a public natural resource. Atanasio bought the house for $23 million back in 2007 and spent another $6.6 million on an adjacent lot. He denied wrongdoing and said his company followed every permit. Whether that's true or not, the image of a billionaire hauling public sand off a public beach with heavy machinery, while regular Californians fight just to set a towel down, tells you everything you need to know about who Malibu is actually for. If you're finding this useful or just entertainingly upsetting, hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and we've got some even heavier entries coming. Number 6. Santa Barbara. They call it the American Riviera. Red tile roofs on white stucco buildings, Spanish colonial architecture lining State Street, palm trees everywhere, wine country 10 minutes in any direction. The whole city looks like it was designed as the backdrop for a Nancy Meyers movie. The median home price on the South Coast runs about $2.33 million, and just up the road in Montecito, where Oprah and Prince Harry live, it jumps to $6.19 million. Underneath that postcard surface, something is going deeply, measurably wrong. Earning nearly $100,000 a year now officially qualifies as low income in Santa Barbara County. The actual cost to cover basic needs in the area is about $111,600. That means a family making six figures, what most of America would consider a comfortable salary, is categorized as financially struggling in Santa Barbara. For the people who earn less, the math turns into something much worse. Unhoused people in Santa Barbara County die at more than 5 times the rate of housed residents. The average age of death for a homeless person in the county is 54 years old. For someone with housing, it's 76. A county supervisor called the situation literally a matter of life and death, and the data backs her up. At least 69 homeless people died in the county in 2025. The 2024 count found 2,119 people experiencing homelessness countywide, an increase of over 12% from the year before. In 2026, community leaders publicly called on Santa Barbara's billionaires, at least 10 of them live in the area, to fund a $750 million housing campaign. The pitch was basically this: you live in one of the most beautiful places on earth. People are dying in your community at 54 years old because they can't afford a roof. You have the money to fix this. Santa Barbara is a city where billionaires own estates with ocean views, and homeless people die 22 years younger than their neighbors a mile away. The flowers are beautiful, the architecture is gorgeous, and the inequality might be the most extreme on the entire California coast. Number 5. Newport Beach. U.S. News ranked Newport Beach the #1 most expensive place to live in America for 2025 and 2026. Not in California. In the entire country. When analysts looked at 859 cities across the United States, Newport Beach came out on top. The average home value is $3.69 million, and it climbed nearly 10% in a single year. Newport Beach doesn't just have money. It has the kind of money that builds walls, hires lawyers, and writes ballot initiatives to keep everyone else out. The city is saturated with homeowners associations, and those HOAs wage constant war on anything that might threaten property values or disrupt the aesthetic. When the state of California told Newport Beach it needed to zone for more housing as part of its legally required housing element, a group of wealthy residents backed by a local developer launched a 2026 ballot initiative designed to gut the entire plan. They named it the Responsible Housing Initiative. Take a moment to appreciate that branding. The initiative to block housing in a state with a housing crisis named itself Responsible. Over on Balboa Island, which sits in Newport Harbor like a perfectly manicured shoebox, longtime homeowners have been fighting against fractional ownership luxury properties. These are essentially high-end vacation party houses where different wealthy groups rotate through each week, treating the neighborhood like a boutique hotel. One 71-year-old resident who's been there for decades said it doesn't fit the community at all. What she meant was, we didn't pay $3.7 million to live next to a revolving door of strangers having pool parties. Newport Beach is beautiful. The harbor is pristine. The sunsets are the kind that make you understand why people pay millions, and the residents will fight the state government, the free market, and basic California housing law to make sure it stays exactly the way it is for exactly the people who are already there. Number 4. Sausalito. Sausalito is the watercolor town just across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. Hillside homes with bay views, waterfront restaurants where tourists eat Dungeness crab, galleries and boutiques on Bridgeway Avenue. It's beautiful, it's charming, and it waged a quiet, brutal war against its poorest residents for years. For decades, a scattered community of people lived on boats anchored in Richardson Bay, just offshore from Sausalito. Some were artists and eccentrics who'd been out there since the counterculture days. Some were retirees who couldn't afford a home in the Bay Area anymore. Some were simply homeless, living on whatever vessel they could patch together and keep above the waterline. The locals in the city called them anchor outs. Then the town decided to get rid of them. The harbormaster personally oversaw the removal and destruction of more than 120 vessels over a 2-year span. Boats were seized, hauled out of the water, and crushed. About 14% of all homeless people in Marin County were living on the water, and Sausalito essentially launched a campaign to destroy their homes. One police officer described the whole flotilla as a giant junkyard. That's a pretty cold way to talk about the places where people sleep at night, even if those places had leaky hulls and peeling paint. When the boats were cleared, the people didn't disappear, they moved on shore. A tent encampment popped up near Dunphy Park, which triggered a fresh wave of outrage from the same residents who had demanded the boats be gone. At one public meeting, a Sausalito resident stood up and admitted with startling honesty that they have an issue with homeless people near the schools and on their street. Then they added, "Because I'm selfish." At least they said the quiet part out loud. Sausalito wanted the problem out of the water. They crushed the boats, and the problem simply moved onto the sidewalk. Because that's what happens when you destroy housing without creating alternatives. All right, we're in the top 3 now. If you've made it this far, you clearly care about seeing the real picture behind these so-called dream towns. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because we go even deeper on places like these every week. Number 3, Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach calls itself Surf City, USA. It's got the pier, the waves, the beachy downtown strip with restaurants and surf shops along Main Street. The branding screams classic Southern California. Sun, sand, good vibes. The city markets itself as a carefree beach paradise. The reality runs a lot darker than the marketing. Huntington Beach has a documented history of extremism that stretches back decades. In the 1980s and 1990s, white supremacist skinhead groups had a visible presence along Main Street and the surrounding neighborhoods. In 1995, 2 white supremacists fatally shot a black man outside a restaurant on Beach Boulevard. That wasn't ancient history buried in newspaper archives. That happened within the lifetime of the majority of people watching this video right now. In April 2021, a rally promoted by KKK-affiliated groups marched through downtown under the banner, "White Lives Matter." Enough people showed up that police had to make a dozen arrests. And in September 2025, after a prominent political figure was killed, the white nationalist group Patriot Front marched down Main Street chanting slogans about reclaiming the country. At a candlelight vigil that same week, men chanted, "White men fight back." A Huntington Beach city councilman responded publicly, saying he despises them and that they disgust him. The fact that a sitting council member felt the need to make that statement tells you how open the problem had become. On top of the extremism, the city has been fighting the state on housing. Huntington Beach illegally halted permits for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, which are essentially granny flats and backyard apartments. Those ADUs had made up more than a third of the city's new homes the year before. The state threatened fines of up to $100,000 per month for non-compliance. Huntington Beach is a town where the surf is great, the pier is iconic, and the headlines regularly feature things that no tourism board would ever want associated with their brand. Number 2, Venice Beach, Los Angeles. Venice Beach was once the bohemian soul of Los Angeles. Street performers on the boardwalk, Muscle Beach iron pumpers posing for tourists, graffiti murals, skate parks, drum circles, and sidewalk vendors selling everything from sunglasses to philosophy lessons. Artists, surfers, weirdos, and longtime locals all sharing one of the most creatively chaotic neighborhoods in America. That version of Venice still exists in postcards and in certain Instagram angles. The Venice you actually walk through tells a very different story. At the peak of the homelessness crisis, as many as 200 tents lined the oceanfront boardwalk. A RAND study examining the situation found that the share of completely unsheltered homeless people in Venice had jumped from 20% to 46%, representing roughly 400 people living on the streets with no shelter. No tent, nothing. The report described them as living at night on the streets, unsheltered in every sense of the word. Travel reviewers stopped being diplomatic. One TripAdvisor user posted in all capital letters that visitors should not go, citing tents everywhere, piles of trash, and aggressive confrontations. A Venice resident of 23 years offered visiting tourists some frank advice. Stay in Santa Monica or Marina del Rey instead. Those cities, the resident said, don't put up with the homeless and simply send them to Venice. That comment captures the deepest problem with Venice. Critics, residents, and city officials have all argued that Venice functions as a containment zone. Wealthier neighborhoods to the north and south, places like Pacific Palisades, Brentwood, and Westchester, manage to keep homelessness off their streets while Venice absorbs the overflow. The boardwalk that once represented creative freedom and counterculture became a symbol of systemic failure on a visible, uncomfortable, impossible-to-ignore scale. Venice is still Venice. The murals are still there. Muscle Beach still exists. The canals are still gorgeous if you pick the right angle on a quiet morning. Abbot Kinney Boulevard is still lined with trendy shops and restaurants where a salad costs $19. The real estate is still absurd, with beachfront homes selling for millions even as the encampment sprawled 50 yards from their front doors. But the distance between the Venice that lives on Instagram and the Venice that lives on the actual sidewalk has never been wider. And the people caught in that gap, both the longtime residents who remember the old Venice and the unhoused people who have nowhere else to go, are the ones paying the price for a city that still hasn't figured out what to do. Number 1. Half Moon Bay. This is the entry that stays with you after the video ends. Half Moon Bay sits about 30 miles south of San Francisco, on a foggy, quiet stretch of Northern California coast. It's known for pumpkin festivals in October, big wave surf competitions at Mavericks, and a charming downtown where tourists eat clam chowder, browse local shops, and enjoy the kind of sleepy coastal atmosphere that realtors describe as peaceful and family-friendly. The median home price is about $1.7 million. The whole town feels like a Sunday morning. On January 23, 2023, a gunman walked into 2 mushroom farms on the outskirts of town and killed 7 farm workers. It was one of the deadliest mass shootings in recent California history. The shooting was devastating on its own. What made it a national story, what kept the cameras there long after the memorial candles had burned out, was what investigators found when they looked at how the victims had been living. The farm workers and their families had been housed in metal shipping containers and sheds with plywood floors. There was no insulation, no proper kitchens. Cooking was done on camping stoves. No housing permits had been filed for any of the structures. Some of these workers had been earning $9 an hour, well below California's minimum wage of $15.50 at the time. In a state that markets itself as the most worker-friendly in America, people were living in conditions that news reporters compared to labor camps in the developing world, less than an hour's drive from Silicon Valley. The governor flew in the next day and called both the housing and the pay simply deplorable. A county supervisor used the same word, calling what he saw deplorable, heartbreaking living conditions. And what happened next made it worse. When the city of Half Moon Bay proposed building 40 units of dedicated farm worker housing, in response to the tragedy, the wealthy residents of the town pushed back. They stalled the project. The same community that had expressed shock and grief over the shooting resisted the only tangible solution being offered. The governor had to step in a second time, publicly calling the delay egregious. Half Moon Bay is a beautiful town. The coast is dramatic. The community is genuine. The Pumpkin Festival draws thousands of visitors every fall, and the big wave surf competition at Mavericks is one of the most thrilling events in all of California. But beneath the charm, this was a place where the people who picked the crops and packed the mushrooms lived in shipping containers, earning wages that wouldn't be legal at a fast food restaurant, hidden in plain sight behind the hills where tourists never drive. They lived a 15-minute walk from homes listed at $1.7 million. They were invisible until the tragedy of unthinkable violence made them impossible to ignore. And even after the shooting, even after the governor called it deplorable, even after the entire country watched the news coverage and reacted with horror. The town's instinct when presented with a concrete solution was to stall, to resist, to protect property values over human lives. That's the California coast. 12 towns. 12 different versions of the same fundamental contradiction. Beauty on the surface. Something harder, something uglier, something more honest underneath. If you want to see more content like this, where we tell you the truth about places everyone else just slaps a dream destination label on, subscribe and hit the bell. We put out new videos regularly and we never sugarcoat a single thing. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.